there. And we'll go in 3, 2, and 1.
Now, the 3-Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Wednesday edition of the 3-Martini Lunch, along with Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Back to the normal schedule today. Good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives. All of it brought to you once again by Hopsy. Right now, you can get Hopsy's sub-home draft machine, 2 mini kegs of beer, 2 Hopsy glasses, and free membership in the monthly beer club for $99. Go to tryhopsy.com/martini and use the promo code Martini. And we'll have much more to say about Hopsy a little bit later on the podcast. And Jim, let's begin with our good martini. Hopefully, we'll see what ultimately happens here. But as you know, President Trump would consider shutting down the government in order to get funding for his border wall. The last time, of course, he was very upset with Congress, but ultimately signed it anyway. Manu Raju over at CNN says Senator Chuck Schumer tells reporters at his on-camera presser that Democrats' position is $1.6 billion for wall funding, far less than the $5 billion Trump wants. But he won't say if Democrats are shutting the door on anything more, saying he's not going to negotiate in public. Later on, he says Schumer's office says $1.6 billion in funding Dems want is for border security generally, fencing, not a concrete wall. Schumer at the presser, the $1.6 billion for border security negotiated by Democrats and Republicans is our position. He would not say if they'd support more. So, Jim, he's obviously not going to meet the president at $5 billion. It could be a little bit of a bargaining chip. Democrats, of course, want legislation, for example, to protect the Mueller investigation. That might be of some value to them on this issue or another one. But the fact that there's at least an effort to fund something of greater border security is a good thing.
Now, I nominate this as the good martini because I have memories of the last government shutdown, and I don't mean back during the Obama years. There was a very brief government shutdown. In fact, it was so short they really didn't even have time to implement all the procedures you would do during a government shutdown. It lasted roughly about 1 day. And this is because Chuck Schumer did not think that he had did not want to go through this. He knew this was putting his red state Democrats in a tough spot. Now, you could probably say, oh, okay, well, now they just had a pretty darn good midterm election for Democrats, picked up 40 House seats. They lost a couple of seats in the Senate. But at this moment, the House is still controlled by Republicans. The Senate is still controlled by Republicans. And the White House is still controlled by Republicans. Chuck Schumer should be in a position where his leverage is very high. And you could say, all right, well, you guys are going to get the blame for any government shutdown. So I'm not going to give you much of anything. And that to most Democrats, given, the choice of how much money they would like to provide for Trump for border security or Trump's border wall, their preferred answer would be zero. So just beginning with this kind of a $1.6 billion is something of a concession. I know he's calling it fencing, not a concrete wall. I've written about this on NRO a couple of times. They're about 18 feet tall fences made out of steel. There's a couple inch separation in between both bars, and it's way too narrow for somebody to squeeze through. That is something that's a feature that's there because the Customs and Border Patrol wants that. They want to be able to see somebody and what's going on the other side. But the fact that he doesn't say if he'd support more kind of means that door is open. And this doesn't strike me as the position of a guy who's ready to take the hardest of hard line. And he's completely convinced that time is on his side and he can hold out and eventually everybody's going to flinch. My suspicion is that Chuck Schumer wants to jump into the next session and, as smoothly as possible. The other interesting thing is what happened on the border this past weekend, particularly Sunday. That probably weakened the Democrats' position. They couldn't be seen as saying, no, we want zero funding for a border wall, zero funding for border security. But, oh, by the way, we believe in border security. So my suspicion is that Chuck Schumer is probably going to give up some more ground. Will it be enough to satisfy the president and Trump supporters? Maybe, maybe not. It depends. But this is a situation where actually I think the brinkmanship is working in favor of the administration and their desires for it. I wouldn't be surprised if it's got up to like $2 billion, $2.5 billion. And that's something of a win for this president. So, we'll see how things shake out. But I think it's early indicators are good that Chuck Schumer that Trump is going to, and the congressional Republicans are going to walk away with more funding for the border wall the Democrats wanted to give them when all is said and done.
Well, let's hope so. We got quite a bit of negotiating to do. Would love to see some actual spending level concessions made here as well, but maybe that's asking too much. I'll take as many victories as I can get here, though. All right, Jim.
We don't do that anymore, Greg, but that's okay. It's we'll be left crying in our beer over that.
Yes, exactly. Oh, trust me. We're going to be tipping them back in a morose mood here once again, as 2 years of Republican rule on everything ends back at $1 trillion deficits. That's not to completely ruin our good martini, but come on, that's one of the big disappointments of the past couple of years. So yes, we can drown our sorrows perhaps. And Jim talked about Hopsy yesterday, and everybody knows that the only way to get beer at its best is straight from the tap. Hopsy brings beer on tap to the comfort of your own home without the price tag that many beer drinkers have come to expect. Have your own beer bar at home with the Sub. That's a countertop appliance that fits neatly in your kitchen, bar, or living room. So think of Hopsy as the Nespresso for beer or the Keurig for beer. And whether you're a hophead, malt mouth, or palate partier, you can enjoy a variety of beer styles from big and small breweries, which rotates monthly, and their IPAs are very, very popular. Jim, I know you've had a chance to sample this on behalf of the Three Martini Lunch. Good for you, and I know you love it.
Yeah, Greg, it's been said that the difference between an alcoholic and the social drinker is just the size of the crowd. This way, if you're going to have people over and you want to share something with them, Hopsy is just a neat, it's a conversation starter. It's the sort of thing people will want to come over and say, see, hey, what's that like? They say it's a 6-pack for each mini keg. My sense is it actually seemed like more. It does not take a particularly long time to get the hang of it, of holding the tap and pouring it without a great deal of head. Again, it's not. They have a wide variety. I've got this at the porter and the stout, both really good. But if you're not into the dark beers, they have IPAs, they have ales. They have a nice wide variety, and they try to match you up with breweries that are in your area. So it's all fresh. It doesn't go bad. Now, they do say that once you put it in there and you start pouring, probably should use it within 2 weeks. My guess is you can probably work your way through a 6-pack in a 2-week period, particularly if you have people over. But yeah, it's just neat. It's just a really kind of fun thing to have. Doesn't take up that much space. It's the sort of thing it's kind of cool to have on your kitchen counter during the party or in your den or in some sort of, if you got a home bar or something like that. But it doesn't take up a ton. You can put it in the pantry or something like that. And it's just, a very neat thing. It keeps you from having to run to the liquor store. They mail the kegs to you. Just a really neat sort of thing. You are, your own little home bartender there. So out of all the products and many fine sponsors we've had here at Three Martini Lunch, this is one that I can wholeheartedly endorse and say, you really want to have this at any time. But I think holiday parties would be a heck of a fun time to showcase your new Hopsy machine.
Fantastic. Hopsy, as we said before, partners with a long list of breweries and ships those mini kegs to your home or your office, and you can get the Sub Home Draft Machine. When I read that phrase, Jim, I just see sub machine, and I start thinking of things that are far more violent than a mini keg. So
alcohol, tobacco, and firearms are all separate, Greg.
Yes, exactly. So to get the Sub Home Draft Machine, the 2 mini kegs of beer, which is equivalent to 2 6-packs, and as Jim says, might even be a little more, 2 Hopsy glasses, and free membership in the monthly beer club for $99. Go to tryhopsy.com/martini and use the promo code Martini. Terms and conditions apply. That's spelled tryhopsy.com/martini, promo code Martini. So take advantage of that. Who wouldn't love something like that this time of the year as you fill out that gift list? All right, let's move on to our bad martini now. And it's good in a way because our good friend David French, who just subbed in for Jim on Monday here in the Three Martini Lunch, has made a very important point in his latest column for National Review Online. Here's part of what he writes. One of the more frustrating aspects of our current political debate is the extent to which differences from administration to administration are exaggerated and distorted. Let's take, for example, media coverage of the Obama administration. To this day, the inaccurate picture of his presidency haunts American discourse. While there are obvious differences with the Trump administration, Obama was not exactly the man who many millions of Americans think he was. And the premise for all this is the media being apoplectic about the Border Patrol using tear gas against the migrants who are charging the border over the weekend. And then, lo and behold, we find out that the Obama administration, or at least the Border Patrol during the Obama administration, actually used tear gas on quite a few different occasions, including a story that a lot of folks found from November of 2013. And, of course, when it's the Obama administration, nobody cared. So David goes on to say that Obama was a peace president who ordered 10 times more drone strikes than George W. Bush. He was the peace president who left office with American boots on the ground in Afghanistan, Syria, and Iraq and scattered across North Africa. His administration refueled Saudi jets to enable the indiscriminate Saudi bombing campaign in Yemen. Oh, and he droned American citizens abroad without even a nod to due process. He was the environmentalist president so hostile to fossil fuels that he presided over an extraordinary boom in domestic oil production. And he goes on and on about a lot of different misperceptions about the Obama administration. He says, by failing to provide perspective, the media creates a sense of outrage when none is justified and inoculates the public against injustice when injustice is real. The left looks at the tear gas on the border and believes norms are being violated when they're not. The right looks at critical reporting about Trump and starts to presume that it's illegitimate, even if the facts are egregious. He ends by saying, the lesson: before you express outrage at any politician for his egregious violation of norms or his radical departure from the rule of law, check recent history. You might be surprised by what you find. So, Jim, we live in a flyby media culture where there's not a lot of perspective and certainly not a lot of reminiscing and comparing to how things happened in the not-too-distant past. So good on David to bring that out, and another black eye for the media here and its inability to put things properly in perspective. Yeah, and
those of us who remember the Barack Obama campaign of 2008 will recall that Obama as president, while we would still call him liberal, did not turn out to be as liberal as he campaigned in 2008. The expansion of drone strikes, the fact that he supported the Saudis, the rate of deportations, the use of tear gas on the border, limiting the number of refugees. ACLU had all kinds of problems with Obama's policies in the war on terror. Why did they end up doing this way? Well, my suspicion is that, Obama kept those policies because they worked. Remember, he was going to shut down Gitmo completely. He sent a lot of guys back, but he never actually completely shut down Gitmo. Because it turns out once you're in office, once you're in a position of responsibility, things look different. It's your call. And all of a sudden, these things that look so simple and easy on the campaign trail, all of a sudden, if you want to say, I no longer want to support the Saudis, well, you have just created a giant gap in our foreign policy and our relationship in the Middle East. The Saudis, for all of their considerable flaws, and I think you can argue that they're behaving even worse than usual, are comparably one of the nicer and friendlier regimes out there, or at least willing to take actions to help American interests. You could argue Obama, expanded the use of drone strikes because he didn't want to have to deal with the issue of what do you do with the people you capture. Nonetheless, this doesn't really, fit in with the image that he did. The rate of deportations, all this kind of stuff indicate that a lot of the Obama criticisms of the Bush administration policies were kind of overwrought. We're kind of ill-informed. We're basically oversimplifying complicated issues that required trade-offs, and that once Obama was in a position of power, not on every issue, but on more than you'd expect, Obama came around to saying, okay, we need to keep at least some pieces of this policy Bush put into place. So Trump gets elected, and now Trump is doing, as we pointed out in case time, I forget every time, can you believe President Trump announced a proclamation for National Loyalty Day? Yes, every president's done that for a really long time. Right. And what it is you can tell the media has been so supercharged into this atmosphere, into this attitude that everything Trump does is an outrage. Everything Trump does is dangerous and a step towards dictatorship and fascistic and all that stuff. And everything Trump does is unprecedented. And it takes a Google search to go back and check whether the Obama administration ever did something similar. Now, we can argue about the levels. We can argue about how frequently. But, again, as David Frez says, there are distinctions between the Obama administration policy and the Trump administration policy. But perspective is in order. And a lot of the people who are up in arms and just, tearing their hair out over Trump administration policies didn't really worry about these when these were Obama administration policies, or the Obama administration enacted more minor versions of it. And what it is either they didn't hear about it because the media wasn't interested, in telling the story of Obama the drone striker, Obama the realist who deals with the Saudis, Obama the guy who likes deportations, Obama the administration that uses tear gas, Obama administration that limits refugees. They wanted to write the hopey, changey, happy storyline, and they didn't look too closely at the details. It's an indictment of the media then, and it's an indictment of the media now. We're never going to get better political discussions about these sorts of issues unless the media takes its duties responsibly and puts them in context and says, hey, using tear gas on the border, that's been happening for a long time. As I wrote yesterday, why do they do that? Because all of the other options for crowd control, rubber bullets, physical confrontation, water cannons. All of that stuff is actually more dangerous for the people who are being confronted, for the crowd that has to disperse. And so, sometimes the least bad option isn't necessarily a great option, but it's still the least bad option. But you're not going to see any of these kinds of discussions when the whole objective of the coverage is to generate outrage.
That's true. And I saw that Twitter exchange where somebody that you were dealing with seemed to prefer water cannons to tear gas.
Yeah. Until I called, he's like, there are lots of other options, which, oh, by the way, I'd listed in the article. Not that he bothered to read the article because, clicking through and reading is hard, Greg. So you'd prefer water cannons and rubber bullets? No, I didn't say that. Well, you said there were a bunch of options. This is the one that is probably least likely to hurt people. Now, again, you don't want to inhale tear gas. I talked about that in having it happen when the wind shifted, attending the 2008 Republican convention in St. Paul. They're trying to get a crowd of violent protesters dispersed. They shot it. Wind blew it in the direction of myself and Mark Hemingway. We found our eyes burning and coughing. It's not fun, but it works. And the whole point is to get people away from wherever they're doing the thing that they're doing. I think most law enforcement officials would love to hear if there's some way to disperse a dangerous crowd without hurting anybody. So far, nobody's really invented that.
All right, Jim, let's move on to our crazy martini now. And we start with good news on this because the midterms are finally over. Or maybe there's one House race they still haven't accounted officially in California, but it looks like the Democrats are going to get it. So they're probably going to have 40 pickups in the House total. But in the Senate runoff yesterday in Mississippi, Cindy Hyde-Smith did, in fact, win that race against former Clinton administration Agriculture Secretary Mike Espy. She won by somewhere between 8 and 9 points, I think. So, of course, the Democrats are calling that as a moral victory. They've called this a racially charged race. On the other side, you could say she's the first woman ever elected to Congress from the state of Mississippi, but that's how the media is looking at this. For the last couple of weeks, they've both chronicled Cindy Hyde-Smith's stupid comments and then, of course, tried to extrapolate them into overt racism allegedly on her part. Most prominently, the line about a friend of hers in politics in Mississippi that she's loyal to the point where if she was invited by him to a public hanging, she'd be in the front row. The Democrats assume that was a reference to lynching, which then they assume that Cindy Hyde-Smith still supports. And then it led to this exchange on Nicolle Wallace's show on MSNBC. I think this was on Monday as Nooses were appearing on the grounds of the state capitol in Jackson, Mississippi. Her colleague, Elise Jordan, has to set the record straight. Listen to this.
I think what a lot of people wonder, not just coastal elites, but people from states other than Mississippi, how can people vote for someone who joked about public hangings, who went to a segregation academy, who I believe it's been reported her daughter did or does as well. And you already see, and I don't know that you can say there's a cause and effect, but yesterday 2 nooses were found hanging on 2 different trees at the state capitol.
Well, the nooses were put up in protest to highlight Cindy Hyde-Smith in her statement. So that was a protest move. I just want to be clear about what was behind that.
Oh, that's important to know. Thank you, says Nicolle Wallace, who apparently has no researchers on her staff. But it's understandable how she came to that conclusion, Jim, because here's how MSNBC originally reported the story.
And this morning, a disturbing reminder, this race has become all about race. 2 nooses found at the state capitol. Hyde-Smith came under fire for saying she'd welcome sitting in the front row of a public hanging, comments her campaign dismissed as a joke.
So, Jim, the media made this a race about race in a large extent. Hyde-Smith probably made some dumb comments along the way, to be sure. But what do you make of MSNBC, even after they knew what the story was with the nooses on the state capitol grounds, making it look like this was another effort of racial intimidation somehow from the right?
Yeah, it's rare you see this total 180, Greg. Can you believe these hateful right-wingers are putting nooses on trees by the state cap? Oh, I'm sorry, wait, what? Greg, can you believe these heroic left-wingers are putting nooses on trees in a form of protest against this racism? They do. Oh, it's good then. Never mind. It's not intimidating or bad or anything like that. Now, in a perfect world, I would really rather that Hyde-Smith had. The quote is, she's talking about Colin Hutchison, a supporter and friend. He's saying, "I support her 100%," and she said the quote from her is, "quote I would fight a circle saw for him." Now, circle saw, I assume they mean the buzz saws, the kind you use when you're cutting wood for lumber or something like that. And I imagine fighting a circle saw would be very difficult and painful because they can cut you and you can't really cut a circle saw. Not really sure why you'd be fighting one, but nonetheless, she's saying, hey, I would do this for him. Their next sentence is, if he invited me to a public hanging, I would be on the front row. And she draws applause and laughter from some in the crowd. Now, I would rather any Republican candidate from Mississippi not use the term public hanging in any context, in any statement while running for election, because the odds of it being misconstrued as hooray for public hangings or hooray for lynchings is considerable. Republican candidates have to, use good judgment in these types of situations. And I don't think she did here. Having said that, the context is, I like this guy so much, I would do something I don't want to do, i.e. attend a public hanging or fight a circle saw. My boss, Rich Lowry, laid this out in the corner yesterday. Again, Republicans should not expect good faith interpretations of their comments from the Democrats or from the news media, and you just can't hand them a stick to hit you with something like this. Having said that, again, the rather transparent demagoguery of this on MSNBC was rather glaring and kind of embarrassing when you get corrected by your own guests about the facts.
It was fun last night watching the vote totals. Fox did a pretty lousy job of it, actually, but MSNBC and CNN had the rolling in vote totals at the bottom of the screen. And over on CNN, Don Lemon had Harry Enten on, who's actually a pretty good forecaster. And his only question was, does Mike Espy still have a path to victory? And Enten had to say, no, I don't see it anywhere.
I mean, the Democrats are touting this was their best finish in 30 years, and that's not the highest bar to clear. I suppose Mike Espy can hold his head held up high because of that. But look, Mississippi is a pretty darn Republican state. There are one or two House districts down there that are competitive, and Democrats have been better in governor's races. But in the Senate races and presidential races, Mississippi's pretty darn deeply Republican. Was there a chance of this? I suppose. We see this in a lot of races where, not outside of the Acela corridor. A Senate race gets competitive. The national media jumps in. Surprise, surprise, very often on the side of the Democrat. And there's this, how could these backwater hicks possibly vote for this Republican? And are then surprised that the Republican does better than expected amongst the demographic that the national media has labeled backwater hicks. If you treat, again, I don't think Espy was necessarily pushing for that messaging, but I think the moment this became the only race remaining of 2018, this is how the media just chose to cover it. Here's that mean, nasty, racist Republican up against a good Democrat. You know what to do, people. And it was one more chance to kick Southerners around and stuff like that. So not surprising the result, but the degree to which MSNBC and their likes were willing to basically be very dishonest about the nooses that were used in that public protest, not a form of intimidation, allegedly. Rather revealing about the way MSNBC handles issues like this.
Yeah, or the media in general on this race. If you want to cover the Hyde-Smith comments, cover them. You should be fair, obviously, in how you cover them. I don't remember a single story, at least on the national press, Jim, about the indictments that Mike Espy was under as Agriculture Secretary and eventually had to resign as a result of those, or his client list of dictators around the world in his private sector work that made Paul Manafort's client list look like the Vienna Boys Choir. So not exactly.
Right. That's foreign policy experience. And again, by the way, who can deny the Espy campaign slogan for this year when asked about those scandals? Hey, our candidate has no convictions.
Congratulations, Mike Espy. You dodged the indictments and you finished better than any Democrat in a statewide race in the last generation. So you still lost, though. Jim, glad to be back with you today. We'll talk again tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. And be sure to visit our friends over at Hopsy. Right now, go to tryhopsy.com/martini. Use the promo code Martini. Terms and conditions apply. Tryhopsy.com/martini. Promo code Martini. And tune in again Thursday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.